Imagine coming home after a long shift, exhausted, with your mind foggy, your thoughts scrambled. You're just a few steps from the place you call your own. But the door you walk through isn't yours at all. It's someone else's apartment, and inside, a man you don't know. You don't hesitate. You pull the trigger. In a split second, a life is extinguished. A tragedy unfolds. But here's the chilling part, the man you just killed wasn't a stranger at all. He wasn't even someone who posed a threat. He was an innocent man, sitting in his own home, simply living his life. How could this happen? How could a police officer, sworn to serve and protect, make such a catastrophic mistake? This isn't the beginning of a routine case. This is a story of confusion, grief, and the brutal reality of a tragic death. Amber Guyger, a seasoned police officer, mistook Botham Jean's apartment for her own. And in the blink of an eye, she shot him. But what led to that moment? Was it truly an error, a tragic blunder? Or was there something more, something hidden beneath the surface? As the case unfolds, the truth is revealed in pieces, each more shocking than the last. The trial, the emotions, and the questions that linger in the air. Why did this happen? Could it have been avoided? And the most powerful question of all, how does a family respond when they lose a loved one to an act of violence? How does a mother, a brother, a father, find it within themselves to forgive the very person who took everything from them? Tonight, we take you inside the events that led to that fateful night. We explore the complexities of the trial, the surprising twist of forgiveness, and the ongoing fight for justice. The question remains, can forgiveness ever truly erase the pain? Or is justice more complicated than we realize? Stay with us as we unravel the details of Amber Guyger, Botham Jean, and the aftermath that continues to haunt us all. The clock is ticking. Justice is still waiting to be fully served. What happened that night, and what happens next, will keep you wondering long after the video ends. It was a warm Thursday evening in Dallas, Texas. The city, like many others, was winding down after another busy day. People were making their way home, eager to rest after a long week. But for one man, it would be a night that would never end. On September 6, 2018, a tragedy would unfold in the quiet corridors of an apartment complex that would forever change the lives of those involved. Amber Guyger, a 30-year-old police officer with the Dallas Police Department, had just finished a long and tiring shift. She'd spent the day working hard to protect and serve the community she was sworn to defend. As the hours passed and her shift ended, she longed for nothing more than to kick off her shoes, relax, and retreat to the comfort of her own apartment. But Amber's night was about to take a turn. Exhausted and distracted, she walked out of the elevator of her building, ready to enter what she believed was her home. The doors of the building were all too familiar to her. After all, she lived there. But on this particular evening, her mind was clouded, her routine disrupted. What she didn't know was that she was walking into the wrong apartment. The door, marked with a red doormat, was not her own. Yet, in her mind, it felt right. She turned the key and entered. Inside, a man was sitting in his own apartment, unaware of the impending danger. Botham Jean, a 26-year-old native of St. Lucia, had recently moved to Dallas for his job at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He was a man known for his kindness, his love for his family, and his positive attitude. A young professional, with a promising future ahead, Botham had moved to Dallas to fulfill his dreams. That evening, like so many others before it, he was sitting on his couch, enjoying a bowl of ice cream and watching TV. But in that moment, Botham Jean's life was about to be cut short. Amber Guyger, thinking she was at her apartment, saw a figure inside and immediately, without hesitation, drew her weapon. She fired a single shot into his chest. Botham Jean, an unarmed man, sitting in his own home, was now dead. Amber Guyger's decision that night would become the centerpiece of a case that would captivate the nation. How could someone sworn to uphold the law, someone trained to assess a situation with precision, make such a fatal mistake? In the aftermath of that deadly shot, there would be questions. Serious questions. But it wasn't just Amber Guyger whose life was upended that evening. Botham Jean's family, his mother, father, and siblings, would soon be thrust into a nightmare they could never have imagined. The grief of losing their son, brother, and nephew was only compounded by the shocking circumstances surrounding his death. But even in the depths of their sorrow, they were faced with a decision that would define their journey: could they ever forgive the woman who had taken their loved one away? But for now, all anyone could do was wonder how this could happen. How could a mistake of this magnitude be made? Was it a tragic accident, as Amber Guyger claimed, or was there something more beneath the surface? And as the investigation began, a string of events started to unfold, revealing details that would shock the public. But first, we needed to understand who Botham Jean was, and how the tragic chain of events that led to that night began. That someone was Botham Jean, a 26-year-old man from St. Lucia, who had recently moved to Dallas for a promising career at PricewaterhouseCoopers. A graduate of Harding University, Botham was known for his radiant personality, his love for his family, and his strong faith. His life was one of community involvement. He was an active member of his church and had plans to become a global business leader. He was, by all accounts, a bright, caring young man with a future full of potential. But on that fateful night, all of that potential was cut short. Amber Guyger, exhausted after a long shift, walked into the wrong apartment. She had parked in the wrong spot, took the wrong elevator, and unknowingly entered Botham Jean's apartment, mistaking it for her own. She saw Botham sitting on the couch, and in her mind, she believed he was an intruder. Panicking, she drew her gun and fired one fatal shot into his chest. Botham Jean, sitting in his own home, had no idea what was happening. His life ended in an instant, taken by a police officer who had sworn an oath to protect and serve. What Amber Guyger believed to be a confrontation with an intruder was, in reality, a tragic and deadly mistake. After the shooting, Amber Guyger immediately called 911. Her voice, frantic and shaky, can be heard on the recording, as she tries to process what had just happened. On the 911 call, Amber can be heard telling the dispatcher, "I'm an off-duty police officer. I thought I was in my apartment. I shot someone." Her words were desperate and filled with shock as she realized what had just transpired. She begged for help, saying she was trying to render aid, but both the dispatcher and the responding officers were already beginning to question the reality of the situation. Despite her initial panic and plea for help, Botham Jean was pronounced dead at the scene. In an instant, the life of a young man full of promise was gone. And now, both Amber Guyger and the Jean family were thrust into a nightmare, one that would reveal more questions than answers. Was this truly just a tragic mistake, or was there something more at play? After Amber Guyger made the 911 call on the night she shot Botham Jean, several key events unfolded. 1. The 911 call. Amber Guyger called 911 after the shooting, and in the call, she can be heard frantically telling the dispatcher that she had entered the wrong apartment and shot a man she believed to be an intruder. She repeatedly asked for medical help, stating that she had shot him and that he wasn't responding. During the call, she was clearly shaken, but her narrative, of confusion and a mistaken identity, was already being conveyed. 2. Arrival of emergency responders. Paramedics and police officers arrived at Botham Jean's apartment shortly after the 911 call. Despite their efforts to provide aid, Botham Jean was pronounced dead at the scene from a gunshot wound. Botham was not armed, and his body was found in the living room. He had been sitting on the couch when Guyger entered and shot him. This raised immediate concerns, especially as Guyger claimed she believed she was in her own apartment and that Jean was an intruder. 3. Amber Guyger's immediate actions. After the shooting, Guyger was initially allowed to leave the scene without being immediately arrested, as the police initially accepted her version of events. She was not detained that night. However, she was required to report to the police station later that evening for questioning. 4. Police investigation. The investigation into the shooting began immediately. During questioning, Guyger's statements were consistent with her initial claim of having mistaken Jean's apartment for hers. However, as the investigation continued, inconsistencies in her story began to surface. Police discovered that the door to Jean's apartment was unlocked, which contradicted her claim of forced entry. Additionally, her behavior and actions following the shooting raised questions about her response to the situation. 5. The arrest. Initially, Guyger was not arrested and was allowed to return to her home. However, after several days of investigation and public outcry, including calls for justice from Jean's family and the public, Amber Guyger was charged with manslaughter and arrested on September 9, 2018, after further scrutiny of her actions and background. 6. Public and legal repercussions. As more details came to light, including Guyger's history of controversial behavior and racial comments, the case sparked widespread protests and debates about police accountability, race, and the use of force. The investigation eventually led to charges being upgraded from manslaughter to murder, but Guyger's defense during the trial centered on her belief that she was in her own apartment and feared for her life. The aftermath of the shooting and Guyger's arrest set the stage for a high-profile trial and widespread public discourse surrounding law enforcement practices and racial tensions. Amber Guyger was arrested on September 9, 2018, just 3 days after she shot and killed Botham Jean. Initially, she was allowed to remain free while the investigation continued, which sparked public outrage. However, after further investigation and mounting pressure, she was charged with manslaughter and arrested. She was later released on bond before her trial. As police dug deeper, they found that Amber Guyger's text messages were not isolated incidents. She had a history of making disparaging comments about African Americans. In one message, she laughed about a fellow officer's racist joke. In another, she expressed disdain for her neighbors, calling them dirty and ghetto. But the most disturbing revelation came when her colleagues exchanged messages with her about the controversial use of force, which she seemed to treat with casual indifference. Could these texts reveal more about the true nature of the night she killed Botham Jean? In the wake of Botham Jean's death, investigators began questioning whether racial bias had influenced Guyger's actions. Could it be that, in her mind, she was entering a dangerous situation in what she thought was her apartment, influenced by a subconscious fear of black people? As the evidence mounted, a chilling possibility began to take shape. Perhaps the shooting wasn't just a tragic accident. Could it have been something more calculated? Yet, the confusion surrounding the shooting didn't end there. According to Amber Guyger, she had just finished a 13-hour shift, was tired, and mistakenly entered the wrong apartment. She claimed she thought Botham Jean was an intruder. But something doesn't add up. The door to Jean's apartment was unlocked and Guyger arrived. Did she make a mistake, or did something more intentional occur? What about the door? How could Amber Guyger have mistaken Botham Jean's apartment for her own when his door was unlocked, and her door required a key card? Could this suggest she had entered with intent? And why didn't she attempt to de-escalate the situation? Did she immediately perceive Botham Jean as a threat? Police initially took Guyger's word for it. But as more questions arose, the case began to unravel. The investigation wasn't just about what happened that night, it was about understanding who Amber Guyger truly was. And that truth began to look more complex than anyone first realized. As the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, the question on everyone's mind became, could racial bias have played a role in the shooting? Did Amber Guyger see Botham Jean's skin color and his presence in what she believed to be her apartment as a threat? Or was this just a tragic misunderstanding of a police officer who acted in fear? Amber Guyger was convicted of murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison. But even after her conviction, the case raised bigger questions. Could the criminal justice system ever truly offer justice for Botham Jean and other victims of police violence? And how did the Jean family cope with their unimaginable loss? Despite the conviction, the Jean family chose not to focus on anger. Instead, They turned their grief into advocacy, demanding police reform and calling for systemic change. The fight for justice was far from over. In court, she expressed deep remorse for killing Botham Jean. But was it enough to undo the damage? And then, something no one expected happened during sentencing. Amber Guyger's tears were genuine. But was her apology enough to erase the grief and loss that the Jean family had endured? Was it enough to heal the wounds of a mother, a father, a brother who had lost someone they loved deeply? And then, in an act that would stun the world, Botham Jean stood up. The room went silent. The judge and the audience looked on, unsure of what was about to happen next. Botham Jean's speech, "I don't even want to say, I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. I wasn't going to ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you, because I know that's exactly what Botham would want you to do. And the best would be, give your life to Christ. I know it's very hard. I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't even wish for you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Please, give your life to Christ." Botham Jean's words shocked the courtroom. But it didn't end there. In a final, extraordinary act of grace, he asked to hug Amber Guyger, his brother's killer. The hug,
"I forgive you."
pain. It was a moment that left the world stunned. The courtroom filled with emotional reactions as the hug unfolded. Many were left asking, why? Why would Botham Jean offer this forgiveness? What drove him to act in such a profound way? Was it an act of Christian grace? Or was it something deeper, something connected to the love that Botham Jean had for everyone, something that even in his death, touched his brother's heart? Could such a profound act of forgiveness be a sign of healing, or was it something far more complex? What Botham Jean did in that courtroom shook the world. A brother's forgiveness, an act that challenged the very core of human emotion and justice. As Amber Guyger stood there, holding the brother of the man she killed, the question lingered, was this the ultimate form of healing, or had Botham's act opened up a deeper wound? But the question still lingers, did Amber Guyger's sentence provide true justice? Or was it a system simply sweeping a tragedy under the rug? Was Botham Jean's act of forgiveness the ultimate form of healing, or did it let the system off the hook? What does this say about justice, grace, and the human capacity for redemption? If you've been moved by this case, hit that subscribe button for more true crime stories that delve into the complexities of justice, forgiveness, and human emotion. Don't miss out on future videos. This case has sparked debate across the globe. Some view it as a message of hope and forgiveness, while others feel it's a reminder of the systemic flaws that still exist in our justice system. But where do you stand? I want to hear from you. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think justice was fully served, or did the sentence fall short of what was deserved? This story is far from over. The questions it raises about race, law enforcement, and forgiveness will echo for years to come. So, let's keep the conversation going. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like this video, share it with friends who might also be interested, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on these thought-provoking cases. The story of Botham Jean, Amber Guyger, and the Jean family is more than just a crime.